protecting your data, reducing your costs, securing your future. MagStor's engineering investments deliver real-world solutions like patented Thunderbolt and NanoPure media solutions, along with tape libraries like the Petabyte Machine and S3-enabled storage. Since 2006, we've been on a singular mission to provide the lowest cost per terabyte for archive storage that is both reliable and immune to cyber threats.
Welcome back to part 2 of our conversation with David Fox from Archiware. In the first part, we covered exciting new features in Archiware version 8, including P5 Synchronize, EDL Restore, dashboard enhancements, and LTO hardware encryption. Now we're going to dive a little deeper into Archiware's expansion into the enterprise market. We'll talk about the future of LTO tape storage, data lifecycle management strategies, and how their API enables workflow automation. Let's continue our conversation with David Fox from Archiware. So I also want to ask about an updated dashboard. It claims customizable insight into storage use per project, supporting efficient resource allocation and operational oversight. That sounds great.
Yeah.
One of the things that struck me, though, was I see this as allowing more client-specific billing and other services, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's the main driver for it because, Archiware, people have been archiving with P5 for 20 years, mostly to tape. And, with media archive, people tend to just keep it because they paid for the tape. And, they might do a migration every so often and they just migrate everything because it's easier. So they got all of this stuff. And if they're billing the client for stuff, then they don't know how much of the cost of their archive they can attribute in different directions. So this features part of something called data lifecycle management, which is it's an add-on. So it's something that all of those P5 archive users going back 20 years could, and hopefully will, they will add it to their P5 license. And it gives them 3 things. So just to recap, it gives them the ability to migrate data between any archive storage that we support. So basically, this is for customers that have already archived over the years. They might want to migrate stuff from LTO5 to LTO9, for example. They can do that. They can also do tape verification with it, so they can go and have old tapes read in the tape library automatically to check everything is okay. And then in version 8, this new feature basically allows you to create analysis runs against your archive index, which is the database that's tracking everything that you've archived. And you can say, this folder and these 5 folders are all this particular project, but they're spread about on my storage. So my index has got various folders that contribute to this particular client's project. You can throw all of those into a little query and then get a data point each day. So you can see the growth of that storage over time. So if you've got 5 main projects that you're archiving stuff for, you can set those up and then in our dashboard just have a little colorful graph that you can also export as a CSV. But it just gives you a visual overview so that if there's one project that's by far and away consuming your archive storage like crazy versus everything else, it just highlights stuff like that to you. And I think it's part of a broader sort of storage analytics software that I see at the trade shows. Various different vendors are doing things now which, rather than just having, your Windows Explorer or your Mac Finder to go browse and try and figure out where everything is, you can now get this kind of database-driven software that gives you immediate stats about what is where. And I think it fits into that kind of landscape.
And if I need to write some custom queries for whatever reason, is the reporting pretty straightforward to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just the archive index is a database that consists of files and folders and then metadata like modification date or additional stuff that you add in. So you can query against any data that's in our archive index and build the analytics around that. Most commonly, it's going to be a path. So most commonly, it's going to be
Folder,
my storage and then projects and then this client name or whatever.
And you support that across all the different storage targets you support: cloud, local?
Yeah, always covering all of the storage. So mostly LTO and cloud, but also you can use disk storage to archive, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense to do that because it's not cold storage. So archive should be cold storage, really.
So, David, this one was really interesting to me. You now support LTO hardware encryption in version 8,
Yeah.
ensures robust security for backups and archives. Now, tell me more about this because this has been a little more costly and difficult to achieve for many users in the past on a tape library doing hardware based encryption. Tell me about it.
Yeah. I might not know everything about the alternative ways to do this, but I'm aware that since LTO 4 or 5, you might know this, the drives have hardware encryption.
Yeah.
They have encryption capabilities in hardware, just like they can do the compression in hardware. So you can do encryption and speed in terms of doesn't slow anything down within the tape drive itself. So for a long time, Archiware has had its own built-in encryption where we encrypt the data in software at source, and then we have a key that we keep and manage, and then the data goes across the network and onto the tape, and it's encrypted. But it's not the strong 256 AES encryption that the drives support, and that's really the industry standard for encryption these days because it's built into the drive, and it's kind of interoperable between different softwares. Although we did find that there aren't many softwares that support this kind of encryption based on using the drive. It's implemented in version 8. It's a popular thing because we've had customers waiting to install P5 for this feature to come along. I've heard from some end users that if you're using the LTFS tape format to deliver a project to the customer that ordered the project, whether that's Netflix or whoever it might be, it's kind of table stakes now that this kind of encrypted tape should be delivered. You send the tapes through the mail or through the courier or whatever, they're completely safe. If somebody gets hold of them, they can't get the data because it's so heavily encrypted. And then via some other channel, you give them a key. And so in order to do this in P5, we basically have like a key area that we added in, where you can go create a key or bring a key in, and then you attach that to a storage pool. You label tapes, and then everything is encrypted from that point on. And whether it's LTFS or our native tape format or backup or archive, however we can put data on a tape, it can now be encrypted. And then the one thing that our UI makes very clear is that if you create a key inside a P5, you must make sure that you manage that key outside of P5, because if the key is lost, then so is all the data that you wrote to tapes that were encrypted with it. So you must have some external way to store those keys.
And in my understanding, in the past, it would get pretty pricey. They needed to get the key management software we just mentioned. Typically, there's a license on the library to support hardware
Yeah,
encryption that's required. And
true.
they needed kind of a dedicated server to run the encryption software and the key management software. So it got a little sporty price wise. So this sounds like a much more straightforward and simpler solution that could be because let's face it, in this day and age, all data at rest should probably be encrypted.
Absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't really make any sense for it not to be encrypted.
And you're saying that since it's using the drive onboard encryption, there's probably not a performance tax like your prior version.
No, there will be no performance impact because the drives are engineered that they know the maximum write speed, that the mechanism in the drive, 350, 400 megabytes a second.
Mm-hmm.
So the encryption hardware will go faster than that, so it'll never be a bottleneck. Going back to what you were saying about costs for encryption, I know that a lot of the enterprise software that will access tape LTO libraries, I'm aware that sometimes they have an encryption license which is required to have the software encrypt. But the drives themselves, to my knowledge, you can do encryption with them, and they'll all do it.
Hey, David, I wanted to step away from a little bit. How does Archiware view the enterprise space or the small medium enterprise space and archive space? Do you have many data protection. Are you doing well in that market as well, or are you primarily still in M&E?
We are primarily still M&E, but I always think about the other verticals as areas for, further study, really. I mean, most of my market experience is in the UK, and the other verticals that we have some P5 installations in are education, like academia. Faculties are doing research and create lots of data. It's not media data. It's and often what's happened in the UK is that there's been an incumbent enterprisey backup archive tool which has been used throughout the academic organization because somebody's been good at selling it in there, or word's got around, or there's a skill set within the establishment where there's shared knowledge, because academics are good at talking to each other over a cup of tea. So that's happened. And then we've come into some of these institutions with P5 and found that, one guy goes, wow, I can do loads of stuff with this. It's really nice. I can script it. There's an API, because they're really technical guys, and they're the perfect customer for us because they take the software, they exploit everything about it, and they understand it, and they don't really ask us any questions or have any problems because they really understand it. And then they talk to somebody else in another faculty and go, hey, you're using this enterprise software, maybe check this out. So we've had some good stuff like that going on.
Yeah,
but also
David, I didn't know that. Do you have an API that's well documented that customers can use to do their own integration?
Yeah. So if a customer wants, because obviously there's a web admin interface, but this is almost sitting on top of the APIs that we eat your own dog food thing. So yeah, you can archive, you can restore, you can back up, you can access cloud storage, everything.
I would imagine, based on what I understand in the marketplace, that particularly the scientific and research communities who are very talented and skilled at taking advantage of those types of features would be a good market segment.
Yeah. And it's kind of like an upside down, like the M&E customers are often quite small companies, very specialized skills around their cameras and editing and so on. Don't tend to have an IT department or some general IT skills. So they often use us and our sales partners to get that kind of knowledge. And it can be a bit of work to get everything working okay for them. Whereas the sciencey education, those guys, they just take it and run. So they're the perfect kind of customer in terms of how much effort you have to put in after you've got the sale.
Taking another step back, what's your view on the LTO tape archive market in general today? Are you pretty bullish, as some of the rest of us are?
Well, yeah, I'm really excited to see the LTO-10 capacities. Really interesting that there's two different ones. Really excited to see those come into market. That decent quantities of tapes and so on. I know some of our friends in the UK already selling the hardware, the libraries and so on with the drives in. Some customers, they just want to buy whatever is the latest gen of the LTO drive because they want to future-proof themselves. On the flip side, you've got to use LTO-10 tapes in LTO drives, whereas previously you could buy a 9 drive but use 8 tapes because they were cheaper cost per terabyte. So that is a little bit painful. Yeah, that's something that's going to have to be dealt with. But LTO-9 is the sweet spot right at the moment, I think, in terms of tape cost per terabyte. There's a bit of a scarcity issue around 10 tapes, which is not there. I mean, the 10 tapes are just starting to be manufactured in decent quantities and flowing into the channel, right? But as with memory and hard drives, it's the hyperscalers, those cloud guys, that have got the first dibs on a lot of this hardware, creating scarcity for everybody else, pushing costs up in a big way. I know that we had hard drive shortages during COVID times and so on, but it seems like what's going to be happening over the coming months is going to be much more intense.
Yeah. Do you see the dramatic increase in other storage mediums, disk and memory, driving continued growth in tape storage market share for archive? It seems
I mean, I think tape storage as an archive and backup format just gets more and more attractive, so long as customers can identify the right stuff to put into cold storage, because we were talking about different verticals. I mean, another one is that we've got some exposure to is surveillance, law enforcement, all that stuff where, again, it's media files, it's camera files, but there's much more compliance rules around the retention of that stuff. In fact, and really quickly, another feature that's in version 8 is the ability to archive to tape, but have a workflow where maybe after 3 years, the index is emptied of the 3-year-old camera footage from CCTV cameras or whatever. And then we're also able to identify the tapes and recycle the tapes and so on. So we're actually specifically addressing the non-M&E customers who have this compliance stuff upon them, which is often the surveillance and the law enforcement end of things.
Yes.
Where there's media, just like in M&E, but it's transient. It doesn't matter in 10 years. You've got to keep it for 4. Yeah. Whereas when you point a camera at an actor, you want to keep that forever because you never know how you might be able to monetize it later on.
Yeah, that's a big
So
market.
anyway, I think I went off at a little bit of a tangent there. So put me back on track, Pete.
Well, I was asking if you felt that tape storage should continue to see increased volumes based on the significantly higher cost of disk,
Yeah.
and lesser
Well,
extent
it
memory.
has to, doesn't it?
I feel it's going to
Yeah.
be a significant driver in the coming years because I don't see that changing due to the AI build out.
No.
Everything's getting more expensive.
I think it will be what customers will have to do is they'll have to more carefully identify that breakpoint between hot and cold storage, because inevitably customers are storing more data as hot storage than they need to, and the only reason they're doing that is because they just don't have the analytics information coming in to know what else to do. But that disk-based expansion might not be necessary if you can identify what can go into cold storage, because you can just go to tape, you can go to LTO9, LTO8 right now in petabyte kind of units.
Yeah.
At much lower cost.
David, it could be a whole nother session. I know you've done some pretty interesting total cost of ownerships around tape in the past. On the MagStor Tape Talk section, we did an analysis just a couple weeks ago of the most effective storage medium in terms of generations. LTO8 actually won by reasonable margin over a similar LTO9 configuration. LTO10 obviously is much more expensive. It's the new generation. It's full height drives only, the enterprise drives only. The half heights are probably another year and a half out before that gap will close. But if there's inconveniences from using more pieces of media to do the same amount of backup, right? So that's a factor. But excluding that issue is LTO8 still takes the cake. But that kind of analysis information, I feel, will be important to users as tape market share grows. So, David, I apologize, but we've kind of hit the time limit, but I have a closing round of questions for you just for fun, okay? I'm going to ask you for a one-word answer only. It can just be a preference or, whatever. Musical artist poll, Lennon or McCartney?
Paul McCartney for me.
All right. One-word answers only, David.
Paul.
Sonny or Cher? Richards or Jagger?
Richards.
Meg White or Jack White?
Jack.
Fagan or Becker?
I don't really have an opinion on that one.
All right.
I'd be kind of going 50-50 on it, so I'll keep my mouth shut.
Great answer. I'd go Fagan. But thank you for participating in our silly little poll.
You're welcome.
David, always a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you at the NAB show in Las Vegas coming up in a couple months, and we'll look forward to doing another session where we branch off into some of these other subjects we touched on.
Yeah, I feel like there's much more that we could talk about, especially around what we were talking about towards the end there with tape and discs costs and so on. So
yeah, we'll make a point of it.
Food for thought.
Thank you for joining us. See you next time.
Protecting your data, reducing your costs, securing your future. MagStor. Visit us at www.magstor.com